You know how sometimes a news event hits and it feels like, well, just another pinprick on the map, almost distant. But then you start to see the threads, how it connects to this much bigger, more complicated picture. That's exactly what grabbed me with the recent spike in tensions between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
It all kicked off with that really brutal, militant attack in Indian-administered Kashmir, April 22nd, 2025.
Horrific.
Yeah, 25 Indian tourists and a Nepali national.
Yes.
Lives lost like that. And what's followed in the, 2 weeks since? It's been a series of escalations that really demands we take a closer look, go beneath the headlines.
Absolutely. And this isn't like a bolt from the blue, is it? It's layered. Decades of history, geopolitics. It's complex.
Right.
So for you, the listener, our goal here in this deep dive is to sort of navigate through those headlines, understand the chain reaction.
Okay.
The initial attack, then India's response, Pakistan's reaction, and how the rest of the world is looking at this pretty delicate situation.
So we're focusing on the key facts.
Yeah.
The different viewpoints.
Exactly. Aiming for clarity, without getting bogged down in every single tiny detail.
Okay, got it. So let's zero in on that first thing, the trigger. That horrible attack on April 22nd.
Right.
It happened in Pahalgam, which is, a pretty well-known tourist spot in Indian-administered Kashmir. That part India controls.
Yeah. Beautiful area, usually.
And this wasn't minor. It was a targeted shooting.
Yeah.
Aimed right at tourists. And the scale that really struck me. Deadliest civilian attack there in 20 years.
20 years. And the timing, too. It's the first really big one since India changed Article 370 back in 2019.
Ah, right, which changed Kashmir's special status. That context is crucial.
It really is. And what's interesting, or maybe predictable, is how fast the Indian government reacted. Strong condemnation straight away.
And Prime Minister Modi saying they'd hunt down who was responsible?
Yep, vowed to hold them accountable. But interestingly, right at the beginning, India didn't publicly name a specific group. That changed, though. Later, the Indian police came out and said 2 of the attackers were Pakistani nationals.
Okay, so pointing fingers.
And then, just today, actually, May 7th, the Foreign Secretary, Vikram Misri, went further. He directly accused Lashkar-e-Taiba.
The group based in Pakistan.
That's the one. Accused them of orchestrating the whole thing. That's a pretty direct accusation, a big step.
Right. And it's absolutely key here, isn't it, to remember Pakistan's side. They immediately denied any involvement. Consistently.
Flat out denial. From the start, said they had nothing to do with that April 22nd attack.
And that disagreement, that fundamental clash over who was behind it, that's really the foundation for the tension for what came next.
Definitely.
So 2 weeks go by, and then India launches Operation Sindoor, the retaliation. What can you tell us about those strikes?
Okay, so yeah, exactly 2 weeks after Pahalgam, India framed it as fulfilling that commitment to accountability. Their stated reason: targeting terrorist infrastructure. That's the phrase they used. Not just the attackers themselves, but places used for planning and directing attacks.
Okay, so command and control type places.
Allegedly, yes. They claimed they hit 9 locations, spread across Pakistan itself and Pakistan-administered Kashmir.
9 locations.
But what's really noteworthy, I think, is how India described what they didn't target. They went out of their way to say no Pakistani military facilities were hit.
Trying to contain it.
Seems like it. They called the actions focused, measured, and non-escalatory. That language feels very deliberate, trying to signal maybe that it was a limited response.
But the story coming out of Pakistan sounds very different, doesn't it?
Oh, completely different narrative. Initially, Pakistan reported 3 areas hit: Muzaffarabad and Kotli, and they're part of Kashmir, and Bahawalpur, which is in Pakistan's Punjab province.
Okay, 3 at first.
But later, their military sources upped that number to 6 locations. And the reaction from Islamabad, from Prime Minister Sharif, immediate and very strong.
Condemnation.
Yes, strongly condemned it as unprovoked aggression. Sharif put out a statement saying, quote, "This heinous act will not go unpunished." Pretty forceful.
Wow. And didn't the Pakistani military also make claims about shooting down Indian planes?
They did. Claim they shot down 5 Indian aircraft and a drone. Now, it's really important to add, India hasn't, as far as we know, publicly responded to those specific claims yet. No confirmation or denial.
Right, so claims and counterclaims. What about casualties? Always a sensitive point.
And again, big discrepancies. Pakistan's military spokesperson reported at least 26 killed and 46 injured on their side.
Okay. And India?
India's army reported casualties on their side of the line of control. It's the de facto border. They said at least 15 civilians were killed and 43 injured, but they blamed Pakistani shelling for those casualties.
So both sides reporting civilian deaths, but blaming the other.
Exactly. And just to add another layer, Pakistan's defense minister told GOTV that the Indian strikes actually hit civilian areas, directly contradicting India's claim about only targeting terrorist camps.
So yeah, two totally conflicting stories about what actually happened, which sadly is pretty standard in these kinds of situations.
It is very difficult to get a clear picture.
And this wasn't just about the strikes, was it? Things were heating up even before that.
No, you're right. Even in those 2 weeks between the Pahalgam attack and the Indian strikes, tensions were already ratcheting up diplomatically.
Like what?
Well, both sides started taking these sort of tit-for-tat steps, expelling some diplomats,
Okay.
suspending visa services, closing some border crossings. Those kinds of moves, they're often signs of a serious chill in relations.
Right. Diplomatic frostiness. And as you said earlier, this whole episode, it doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Not at all. It fits into this unfortunately long and repeating pattern. Conflict, tension over Kashmir. We've seen similar flare-ups before.
Like the surgical strikes India claimed back in 2016 after the Uri attack.
Exactly that. And the airstrikes in Balakot in 2019 after the Pulwama bombing. It's a familiar cycle, sadly.
And maybe for listeners who aren't steeped in the history, the core issue is Kashmir itself, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's territory claimed entirely by both India and Pakistan. But since 1947, when they both became independent, it's been divided, administered in parts by each country.
And they fought wars over it.
2 major wars, yes.
Yeah.
And since 1989, there's been this ongoing armed insurgency in the Indian-administered part, fighting against Indian rule. So this latest flare-up, it's playing out against that very deep, very troubled backdrop.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Given all that and the fact they're both nuclear powers, how has the world reacted?
Well, largely with calls for calm, as you'd expect. There's been a pretty unified message urging restraint and de-escalation.
From who?
The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, he urged maximum restraint very quickly. The European Union said something similar, countries like Bangladesh too.
Okay.
The British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, specifically mentioned the need for dialogue.
And the U.S.
U.S. President Trump expressed hope for a quick end to the fighting, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio said they were monitoring things closely. So the overall vibe from the international community is clearly one of concern, recognizing this could spiral.
Right. 2 nuclear-armed states.
Mm.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Extremely high.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive for now, what are the absolute key takeaways? What should people really hold on to?
I think the main points are these. India's military action, Operation Sindoor, was positioned as a direct response to that deadly Pahalgam attack.
Okay.
India framed it as counterterrorism, targeting those they blame. On the flip side, Pakistan absolutely denies any link to that first attack and calls India's strikes unprovoked aggression.
2 opposing narratives.
Exactly. And this disagreement, plus the actions taken, have led to a serious, potentially very dangerous escalation between these 2 neighbors. Neighbors with nuclear weapons, a long history of conflict, and the unresolved issue of Kashmir right at the heart of it.
And it's just so important, isn't it, to realize we're hearing 2 very different stories here.
Crucial.
Which means, for all of us listening, we need to approach the information carefully.
Mm-hmm.
Be a bit critical. Understand that the reality on the ground is probably way more complex than any single headline suggests.
Which really brings us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on. Given this history, this long history of conflict over Kashmir, these cycles of escalation that just seem to repeat,
Yeah.
what are the real long-term chances for stability in that region? What does stability even look like there? And maybe more pointedly, what role, if any, can the rest of the world, international actors, realistically play in actually helping find some kind of lasting peace? Not easy questions, obviously, but definitely worth thinking about as this whole situation keeps unfolding.